It's Lars. Thank you for checking out my podcast, and have a great day.
Joe Thomas sitting in for Lars Larson with a gauntlet to throw down. I'm told that when a guest host is in the seat for Lars, you guys take it easy on me. Well, don't. That's all I'm saying. Don't. Believe me, if you ever had dinner with me and my kids, nobody takes it easy on me. 866-HEY-LARS. You can also get your questions right to me at joe@wchv.com because Mackenzie's going to be busy back in the studio. A lot to cover today. So many things. You can't not have something to talk about today. Just going over some of the list of things that just schooling around some of the areas where the station is heard. I was just going over some of the news wires. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has issued an executive order to deprioritize the enforcement of of laws prohibiting the possession of certain psychedelics. Gee, as if we couldn't have seen this coming. So now, in this mushrooms, whatever it may be, psilocybin. So it was, the door was open where Barack Obama said, I'm telling law enforcement, don't enforce marijuana possession prohibitions. Now it's on to psychedelics in Minneapolis. I have friends in Minneapolis who said, it may be appropriate, but you tell me. 866-HEY-LARS. Researchers estimate, now this goes into the heat wave that we're dealing with. Virginia Commonwealth University researchers estimate hospital ER visits driven by the extreme heat, not by anyone's behavior. Notice it's the heat's fault that somebody needed to go to the hospital. They might not have had anything to do with it. It's the same thing that happens when the firearm commits the violence, not the person holding it. Researchers estimate the cost of this heat wave is already around $1 billion in emergency room costs. Alabamans are going to start seeing a break in the grocery sales tax. Governor Kay Ivey said, but it's only gradual. They couldn't get it done in one shot. The Jamestown Mall in North County, Missouri, is coming down. It's been empty since 2014. And we have an empty tire factory that's been empty since 2007. And it just baffles me how this is good business to leave a building empty. How is that more profitable than getting new tenants in? Connecticut authorities say 75% of jobless claims this year have been bogus. President Biden says, fear not, folks. I'm going to protect you from artificial intelligence. I'm working with Google and Amazon to fix it. Does that warm the cockles of your heart? A woman is suing a California restaurant claiming that her meal served to her at a restaurant called Coup de Thai was so spicy it was unfit for human consumption, and she's suing for damages. And Donald Trump announced today, based certainly on the popularity of The Sound of Freedom, that human traffickers will face the death penalty if he's reelected president in 2024. Speaking of movies, Barbenheimer is off to a hot start already with $33 million in the coffer. That's the combined movies, the biopics, if you will, of Barbie and Oppenheimer. And I'm sure the Oppenheimer I'm just judging by the trailers on this. I'm pretty sure the Oppenheimer movie will be designed to make you say, oh, I don't like that nuclear energy. It looks scary to me, Bob. Oppenheimer sure didn't look like he looked pretty depressed about the fact that he opened that can of worms. Let's get on with it. We've got Clark already in on First Amendment Friday. Good evening, Clark, or good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you, buddy?
Well, give me a rough one here. What's your First Amendment point?
Okay, my point is I'm just going to give a suggestion to President Trump. Next time he runs, instead of Sleepy Joe, let's call him what we know him as now, Sloppy Joe. Sloppy Joe.
Sloppy Joe. You mean
I
storing
just
his?
wanted to get that to Trump. That's my only point.
We will pass it along to you. Sloppy Joe keeping his classified documents in the garage with his Corvettes. By the way, I don't know if you saw this on the subject of Sloppy Joe. We've got now controversy. Senator Chuck Grassley yesterday released an FBI 1023 on President Biden and the White House, claiming that they were involved in a bribery scheme with Burisma and the Ukrainian authorities. The White House is smacking back.
The White House is now confronting Republicans releasing this full FBI document. Officials here say that Republicans are leveling claims that have no credibility. This is Ian Sams, a spokesperson here. He writes to us, quote, "It is remarkable that congressional Republicans, in their eagerness to go after President Biden, regardless of the truth, continue to push claims that have been debunked for years."
Hang on a second here. Let's go to another piece of audio tape. This is the Council on Foreign Relations some time ago, and then former Vice President Joe Biden.
I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, "No," I said, "I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion." They said, "You have no authority. You're not the president." The president said. I said, "Call him." I said, "I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion."
See, so the president, and this goes to something I've asked my local audience here in Charlottesville as well. There was a phrase that became very popular during the Watergate hearings. What did the president know and when? I haven't really crossed that Rubicon in this whole who's paying who, the big guy and Burisma and the Chinese Communist electric company that Hunter's on the board of. But in his braggadocious best, what did Clark call him? Sloppy Joe? Sloppy Joe just let a little truth roll out from his bag. What did the president know and when? And I'm not talking about 46. I'm talking about 44. Unsubstantiated claims of bribery going on. I didn't play the whole clip because I'm not sure if it was edited or not, and my station doesn't care if I play the unedited version, but yours might. So, SOB, they fired the prosecutor. Well, everyone yucks it up. And now look at what we've got. And somehow these are unsubstantiated claims that the Bidens were involved in bribery. I truly believe they believe that if they say it enough times, it becomes true. I mentioned Oppenbarbie or whatever it's called, this too. How much you want to bet The Sound of Freedom is still up in the top 3 come this time Monday? You're listening to First Amendment Friday on the Lars Larson Show with me, Joe Thomas. 866, hey, Lars. Well, it's Joe Thomas in for Lars Larson on this First Amendment Friday. 866, hey, Lars is the phone number, and the gauntlet is thrown down. I was told, listen, don't worry about it. Lars gets lots of calls. You don't need to worry about that. But, we're a competitive bunch, we radio show hosts, so please, you can also email joe@wchv.com. That comes directly to me. You can also vote in our Twitter poll, which is brought to you by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, conservative values that we all believe in. Joined, you should too. Go to amac.us, call 888-262-2006. AMAC is better for you, better for America. A little pride in this one. Kenzie accepted my idea for a Twitter poll today, and it's already got like 169 votes. It's only been up there for a couple of minutes. Are the protests over Jason Aldean's song "Try That in a Small Town" making more people buy it or fewer? Your choices are increasing, no impact, or decreasing. So far, out of the 174 votes, 96% saying it's increasing the votes. But vote online at Twitter, and, of course, the Twitter handle is at Lars Larson Show. Jesse is joining us on First Amendment Friday. Good, I don't know, is it afternoon or evening? Where are you at, Jesse, today?
I'm in the beautiful state of Idaho. We're in Mountain Standard Time.
All right, so good afternoon to you. So what is on your mind? I saw that they just had the trial wrap up there and over Coeur d'Alene, and you calling about that or something else?
No. Something you said about if you say something enough times, people will believe it. And so
that's what the Biden administration sure believes.
I've got two quotes from Adolf Hitler. One is, if you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. Yep. So that's the first quote. This other one, every time they come up with gun control, I tried to post it, and I always get rejected. They won't let me post it on Facebook. But Adolf Hitler said, to conquer a nation, you must first disarm its citizens.
Remember, they went right out and did that, and it was for your own safety. It was right after, I think it was right after or right before Kristallnacht, and we see so much of this going on. It is so frightening to see the authoritarians.
Well, and I feel like I've got the most simple answer to these school shootings. Is first of all, you only have one door that people can come in. Other doors, people can go out for safety and stuff. But one door, you have an officer there, whatever, and they have to have a code, and they get in. Then you have signs out front that say, our principal and teachers are carrying heat. Now, what idiot is going to come in that school and shoot them up? No, they're going to go to the school that says, we are a gun-free zone.
Of course, and when you look at all of these school shootings, there are some commonalities. And you talk about access. The one in Texas, there was a broken door that everyone knew about and hadn't been fixed. Why, we just had an escaped convict from a local prison near me in Virginia. A cop killer escaped through a door in a prison that they couldn't have fixed. So that's that's simple. We're looking for the fanciful, Jesse, and life, it's been my experience, and I'm approaching 60. It's been my experience that life is generally the simplest you can possibly make it, and the more difficult somebody's trying to make an answer to something, the more they really don't want to handle it. Yep.
And I worry. I'm a brand new great grandmother of twin boys, and it's fun. But what is this life going to be like for them when they're adults? Oh my gosh, it scares the daylights out of me. I want to gather my whole family together and let's all just drink the Kool-Aid.
Well, there's a book. It's a tough read. It came out in 1996. It's called The Fourth Turning. I was talking about with one of my local listeners the other day. That, along with the Tytler cycle. I mean, there's so much evidence that says the human race is doomed to go through this wash, rinse, repeat cycle of liberty, prosperity, laziness, or perhaps contentment with that, followed by anarchy and then tyranny. And we've done it so many times before. It is hard to make the case that we're not doing it again. I would like to think with all of the technology that we have talk radio, we have the internet, we have social media such that it is, that we might be able to avoid it this time. What do you think, Jesse?
Well, I think if you look at the scriptures, and I'm a religious person, but I'm not a fanatic, it says right in the Bible that this promised land is going to be held up by a thread. And so it's got to get worse before it's going to get better. And we just have to have faith to know that it'll prevail.
I can't make everyone else do the right things, but I can make me do it. Right, Jesse?
Yep. There you go.
God bless you.
There you go.
You have a good, and congratulations on being a great grandma. We got Linda on the line for us on First Amendment Friday. Let me look at the clock, make sure I have time to talk to Linda. How are you, Linda? Oh, It's Jason? Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Jason,
Joe.
I was misreading the sign. Jason is on the line with us. How are you doing?
Good. I'm glad that they're finally deciding to put sanctions on China for the dangerous drugs that they're producing and sending into the country. I'm wondering what you think if Joe Biden is actually going to sign off on that, or if they're just going to just let that bill they're just going to let that bury it on a Friday and just forget about it, or.
Well, they'll bury it, and partially Biden, if he addresses it at all, I expect him to say that our partnership with China is so important that we can't risk this kind of thing, and the actions of a few rogue actors cannot be held to blah, 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 blah. And you can't go into an Indian restaurant without hearing a Chinese accent or something. He'll say something ridiculous at the end of it, that, God save the Queen or something. But
I'm glad you brought up
he's not going to.
Opium is in the Bible. If people want to look up opium in the Bible, they gave Jesus opium and vinegar as he was suffering on the cross to soothe his pains.
You're talking about different things as apples and oranges in a lot of ways. I mean, the poppy plant has been around so many places. You've got to realize that just the poppy plant is one thing, and a raw derivative of a plant. You're talking about the psilocybin and this idea that Minnesota is going to decriminalize or de-emphasize the prosecution or the arrest of folks with hallucinogens.
I was mentioning fentanyl too. I didn't want to say fentanyl; it's such an ugly word, but.
Well, but I mean, there's something. There's something else, and we talk about the responsibility of people, and we've taken down all of the rule books, and we've been told we don't need those anymore. We're so much more evolved than rule books. What are the 10 Commandments? What do we need those for? We don't need a list of 7 vices. What are those? Those are, we're raising. This is Dr. Curry Myers, criminologist, has written quite a bit on feral man. There's actually a psychological child-rearing pursuit called free-range parenting. And we're raising people with no tether to rights and responsibilities. And it's my belief, Jason, I don't know about yours, but every right comes with a counterbalancing responsibility, just like every vice comes with a counterbalancing virtue. And we need to start teaching the virtues, and we need to start, fighting the vices, because I have wine upstairs. I don't even want to get into what I used to do when I was in my teens and 20s, but I understood what I was doing after the fact, and I've got myself together because I want to keep my faculties straight. And that's the problem, is that we don't respect the idea of keeping our faculties straight. And we use medicines rather than other, more holistic ways. That's my personal view on it, Jason. But you have a great weekend, my friend. Thank you for joining in on First Amendment Friday. We got a bunch of folks lining up. See, I'll show you. Guest hosts can handle First Amendment Friday. 866 Hey Lars with Joe Thomas on the Lars Larson Show. Joe Thomas in for Lars Larson from the great city of Charlottesville. I was corrected by email the other day that grammatically I should refer to it as the second most important city in the history of mankind, because greatness is a subjective, I don't know, great. But, in our world, in radio, we deal in pejoratives. So, most important isn't nearly as punchy as greatest. But thank you for joining us on this First Amendment Friday, voting in our Twitter poll at Lars Larson Show. Does the protest over Jason Aldean's song "Try That in a Small Town" make it more likely people will buy it, or fewer people? If you have not heard, I've got a clip here of the song in question. You tell me if you think this is...
Somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like.
Try that in a small town, and it's apparently controversial. It's like, oh, they're threatening violence. I don't know. You tell me, and you tell us all online at Lars Larson Show. We got a bunch of folks on the line, so we will begin with Fred, who I think is calling from the Denver area. Fred, thank you for joining us on First Amendment Friday. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I hear you fine. 4x4.
Okay, and actually I'm in Oregon, but I have a Denver phone number.
Oh, okay. And as my wife is the same thing as well. You never lose, you never get rid of the cell phone if you keep it, right? So what's on your mind?
I'm getting really, really, really tired in the direction that this country is going in. I was raised to be a good, God-fearing, love the country, kind of a person. And we are going backwards so fast that we have all these factions. And over what? Your last comment about the Jason Aldean song. What are you guys whining about? And shut up. Just for a chance, would you just kind of let, things go?
Well, sure. Yeah.
Whiners in the...
If you don't like the song, don't buy the record. That's fine. But that's I have a phrase for them. I call them the crimeless victims. You've heard the phrase victimless crime, I'm sure, right, Fred?
Yeah.
Well, flip it around. These are the crimeless victims. These are the folks who are offended that something exists that they don't approve of. And we used to, it's funny. These people's grandparents back in the '60s used to rail against this kind of prurience, but they apparently find it to be cool now that they're on Social Security and want to make sure big government is taking care of them. Take heart in this, though, Fred. I think the crimeless victims are a very small portion of the population. They're just getting an inordinate amount of the media time because controversy, heartstring stories sell. They get click-throughs. They get you to stay through to the commercial break on the news. So you're seeing a lot of it. But I've looked at polls, Fred. Much of America feels exactly, including Democrats, feel the same way you do about the direction of the country. So hang in there. I think there's way more of us than there are of them. Thank you, sir. You have a good evening. Charles is on the phone with us as well, next on First Amendment Friday on the Lars Larson Show. How are you doing, Charles?
Doing well. Hey, I just wanted to make two clarifying points regarding what the lady earlier said about gun control. Mm-hmm. So the first quote she said was actually from Goebbels, which is a propaganda minister, but that's a pretty nitpicky thing. The second point she made was regarding gun control and Hitler. So believe it or not, actually Hitler relaxed gun control only for his supporters, meaning that he was able to solidify his control this way. So perhaps the Weimar Republic having strict gun control actually encouraged an overthrow of Hitler, and nobody could fight it. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
You bring up the Weimar Republic, and it's an important part of this story, and it's really the more important part of where we are as a country right now, because that was the point where the poverty was getting out of control, and the inflation was unheard of. I mean, worse than we have right now, and that laid all the groundwork, much as the way the middle 18th century laid the groundwork for the French Revolution. The poverty got out of control. People weren't paying attention to it. They let the economy stagnate, and that becomes the fertile soil. We were talking about cyclical, and this is a big part of that cycle, is that these things kind of are predictable as they happen, and that's the part I hope we can fix. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. Mark is next on with us with a point for First Amendment Friday on the Lars Larson Show. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing fine. When it comes to the Hunter Biden cocaine, after the DOJ and Secret Service stated that nothing to see here, I have not heard anyone from the media, from Congress, or asking, all right, well, let me see the videotapes. Let me see the forensic evidence. Let me see the report by those Secret Service agents that investigated that. And why wouldn't they? Because they can't do a claim, well, it's an ongoing investigation. No, they already stated that it's closed. So why aren't they asking for that?
Oh, I don't know who has or hasn't issued a FOIA request, because that's usually what you would look for, is somebody would issue a FOIA request, but those don't get made public until they're responded to, and that's what you're looking for is some news agency or some watchdog group to issue a FOIA request, and then look for, at very least, the security camera video, if you can get it, of that area of the White House where the cocaine was found.
But I haven't heard anyone that seems to care. Okay, well, it's a done deal, so move on.
Yeah, and I understand that. In the triage of needs, it is an interesting story. It is a story that, again, could put another nail in Hunter's coffin. But when you look at the bribery charges and you look at all the other things, it is certainly damning character evidence. I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you, sir. Jerry is next in on the Lars Larson Show, First Amendment Friday. How are you doing, Jerry?
I'm doing okay. You were talking about psychedelics. This is the thing. Whenever I government something illegal, the burden is on the government to why it should be illegal. That the problems from it not being illegal should be greater than it being legal. So why should something be illegal? The burden is on the government. So I look at that. I look at anything. I want to know, if the government's going to make something illegal, why? Why is it necessary? And I look at psychedelics, I don't see the need. Some people don't like to try them, fine. But whenever we look at generally the war on drugs, we see the violence and the constitutional violations that are caused by it. To me, it's more the problems with it being illegal than legal.
Well, certainly you create the economy of scale when you drive something into the shadows. We learned that during Prohibition with alcohol. But I think the case is made regarding some of the dangerous side effects of psychotropic drugs. Psilocybin has medical benefits as well. And perhaps are you going to say you trust the same folks who have ignored governmental requirements to issue statements and surveys and research into the efficacy of certain other medical treatments like vaccinations that they've been required to do every year? They've ignored that as well. So I don't trust the government necessarily to regulate anything, Jerry. And unfortunately, the argument against drug legalization is always kind of shallow. They say, I don't want my airplane pilot stoned. Well, I don't want them drunk either. Matt is hanging on the line. We'll get to you next. We're also going to visit with a fellow who's out there trying to help people make sure that their dogs and cats and kids and whoever's in the hot cars don't get in trouble on the Lars Larson Show. Well, it's actually Joe Thomas in for Lars Larson from Lars's affiliate in Charlottesville, Virginia, WCHV. You can email me at joe@wchv.com or 866-HEY-LARS. I do want to spend a little time with all the heat that we're suffering under, whether it's San Antonio, Las Vegas, in some of those places. I mean, it's extreme, or even Charlottesville, Virginia, where in the 90s, he feels like over the 100. Your safety of those who are in the car with you or give you the puppy dog eyes that they want to come with you, please don't leave me home. But Matt was hanging on the line first on First Amendment Friday. Matt, you have the microphone. Step up and be heard.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for taking my call. It is a perfect day in Portland, Oregon.
Gorgeous
so I'm calling about the crimeless victims that you're talking about, and I couldn't agree more. What you said. If you don't like it, don't buy it. It's just this is America. People can do what they want. However, wasn't the pretty much equivalent hue and cry done last month to Target and Bud Light?
Well, not by me.
Fair enough.
So I can't. Yes, you're right, and there was. My favorite point about Bud Light was made by a local legislator named Nick Freitas. He went on Instagram and he posted a video. He said, "So look at this straight. Conservatives are bent out of shape because there's a man who's pretending to be a woman promoting water that's pretending to be beer, right?" And I found the humor in that, and that said all I needed to say. And I wasn't buying Bud Light anyway, and I don't care what you buy. And a lot of people are voting with their feet, and this both sides feed into this ESG movement, DEI, and the divestiture. Florida's doing it now. They're investigating whether or not to take any Florida pension fund money out of Bud Light, and okay, I see where it could be bothersome, but I've seen bothersome promotional ads for other things, that have bothered me too, and I just shrug it off and say, I'm not going to buy this stuff.
Yeah, I think both sides need to knock off the hypocrisy and have some sort of consistency, and not just look for, people are dying for outrage and looking for some reason to take umbrage, and it's just nonsense. Let's stay in our lane.
Yeah, maybe we have an umbrage abundance, and we need to get rid of some of it. Anyway, Matt, thank you, sir. Well said, though. Joining us now is the founder of a web campaign called Heat Kills. It's heatkills.us. John Sutz is on with us. He's an activist who has just done some amazing research in the dangers and perils that animals face if you insist on bringing them with you wherever you go. John, thank you for joining us on the Lars Larson Show. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me, Joe.
If I understand your journey, it started with an animal who came to your rescue, and I understand that service dogs are specially trained, but I think all dogs are a service dog. If you've ever experienced the agape love that a dog gives you, and in just the measures that you need, and that started your journey on trying to fight for dogs, especially welfare, and brought you to the issue of hot cars and the dangers?
Yes, I was fortunate enough to find the puppy that I believe was made for me shortly after 9/11. I have no experience in being a parent and no experience with dog care, but we muddled through, and my dog Shayna decided early on that her mission in life was to become the world's brainiest super dog. And she went a long way to becoming that. And by the end of her life, she had memorized the names of 57 toys and could put them away in a box or a bowl by name and dunk her balls in a basket and stack her rings on a pole. And along the way, I just became very concerned about people like me who really have you can go and adopt a dog today, and you really don't need to demonstrate any knowledge about dog care in general. But as the years went on, I kept seeing the issue of dogs being left in hot cars. And I'm not a scientist. I don't play one on TV. But it just seemed to me that this is just insanely dangerous just by virtue of the fact that they're covered in fur. But I know what it feels like to sit in a car, the AC's off, or whatever it is. You're sitting there, you're waiting for something, and we're not covered in fur. And then when I started doing some research, I discovered dogs can't sweat like we can. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that even though a day may feel reasonably cool to us and we're just going to do some grocery shopping, you leave the dog in the car, even with the windows cracked, and the inside of that car can quickly become an oven. And I was astonished at the... Go ahead.
Well, and you talked about your research, and that is really your gift to the world, is your research ability, as I know you. And so if somebody goes to heatkills.us, the preponderance of the data there is what they're going to see. It's certainly a topic that you I think we all would say, well, certainly we want to keep our pets safe. But when you start seeing the data you've collected, it's stunning.
Well, it is, and I thank you very much for that. I'm very much an evidence-driven person. There's so much I don't need to tell you, political hyperbole, in which one person says, well, this is true and that's true, but the one thing that's missing is the evidence. And I tried to find a website out there that contained scientific evidence presented in a simple way, and I just set it upon my mission that I'm going to create the website that I wanted to find, but I could not, and I think will help to arm police, dog owners, police officers, animal welfare officers, the general public with a clear understanding of why it is so dangerous to leave a dog in a car, even if you think it's cool, and even if you leave the windows partially open, that this can become a deadly situation and start causing damage in as little as 10 minutes, even in 70-degree temperature.
Oh, sure, and it's a convection dome in there, but also, and especially as we see the extreme heat in the Southwest, especially, there's got to be an adjunct also to making sure that dogs and cats are safe in that kind of heat as well. And I've talked to a lot of folks making sure there's shady areas for the dog if they're outside, or even a cat. You think cats are sort of self-sufficient, but you got to make sure there's places for them to get out of the sun as well. Maybe that's a whole other chapter of heatkills.us, is to make sure that dogs and cats are safe even if you do leave them at home.
Well, the problem here is that whenever we see the tragedy of a child left in a hot car, 99% of the time the excuse given is that the parent forgot that the child was there. It's not intentional. But 99+% of the cases in which dogs die or they suffer terrible brain damage or organ failure inside of a car is because they were deliberately left there because the dog's parent or owner did not know how dangerous it is. They go in to pick up a gallon of milk, some bread, they see something else, they get a call from their boss,
Right.
There's a line, whatever else, and before long, 5 minutes turns into 10, turns into 15.
We got to
and they
run.
come out and someone's broken the window and the dog is dying.
Heatkills.us. John Sutz, thank you so much for doing what you do. Heatkills.us. More of First Amendment Friday next on the Lars Larson Show. Actually, it's with Joe Thomas from Lars's wonderful affiliate in the second most important city in the history of mankind. We'll take your pedantics and I'll see you that. I call it the second greatest city in the history of mankind, based on the work product of a couple of our kids, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. James Monroe also in there, too. He was the negotiator. He brokered the peace that got us the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution at the end of it all. You can vote in our Twitter poll. This one is kind of fun, and it's a runaway. The Twitter poll: are the protests over Jason Aldean's song "Try That in a Small Town" making more people buy it or fewer? And so far, out of 220 votes, 95% say it's increasing sales. And, of course, our Lars's Twitter poll is brought to you by AMAC. That's the Association of Mature American Citizens, conservative values we all believe in. I'm a member, Lars a member, you a member too? Go to amac.us or call 888-262 2006. AMAC is better for you, better for America. Doing this, can I get me one of them Lars Larson challenge coins? I'll send him a Youngkin T-shirt if he wants. I don't know. Go, please check out the Lars Larson challenge coin online at larslarson.com. Coming up, how much would you pay for a team that is so bad it barely ever makes the playoffs, and when it does, it's out in the first round? $6 billion sound right? And they want a new stadium funded by the taxpayers. We'll get into that, but it is First Amendment Friday, and you can also email at joe@wchv.com. This one comes in from James. Great show from Lars Country in Vancouver, Washington. Your previous calls are not quite right. The big lie is Bernaysian propaganda after Edward Bernays, Woodrow Wilson's propaganda man. Goebbels and the Nazis learned it from him. Also, D'Souza's The Big Lie is a great work on it. I highly recommend it. The Dems love this, and they know it will work. Look at what happened with Sarah Palin. Tina Fey's parody of her became the image because the Democrats repeated it all the time. It faltered a bit, but they have doubled down with Biden and the massive lies. Well, and when the president's doing it, and you bring up the point, Nazi Germany is the one everyone runs to, but America Mark II with the technocrat movement and the birth of a nation. There was a reason Woodrow Wilson screened A Birth of a Nation, the movie about the Klan, at the White House. They used and still use the Klan, those knights in white satin. And here in Charlottesville, don't even get me started talking about the Knights in White Satin and Antifa and Black Lives Matter and what they did in my city. But they use the same scare tactics that Goebbels and Kristallnacht used in the 30s. They were using them in the 1890s to scare people into giving more authority to the federal government. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? Sheila is next up on First Amendment Friday, 866. Hey, Lars. How are you doing, Sheila? Thanks for calling.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I just discovered your show within the last 3 weeks or so.
Great.
And, yeah, oh, my gosh. It never moves, and my pets have all moved into the back room. They don't, because I keep it up high. All of the controversy right now regarding related to the Joe Biden, Hunter, cocaine cover-up, all that bull BS.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
BS,
the initials are okay.
Okay, all the BS about there's no evidence, and they're confused about everything, and they're thinking that if they don't talk about it or they don't admit it, then it'll go away. Well, on the flip side of this, I've been hearing about this serial killer, the alleged serial killer.
Gilgo Beach?
The Gilgo Beach guy. I gave him a nickname. I was going to call him Joe Blow from Kokomo.
Wow.
Correlation. Yeah, in correlation. Just a nickname to help me remember the whole.
Let me ask you this, Sheila. Can I ask you a question? I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'm curious because we were talking about this the other day after the hearings on the laptop and the FBI whistleblowers, and I got a very concerning vibe from Kevin McCarthy and the House Republicans. And I don't know if you remember the blue dress and Monica Lewinsky and lying under oath and the censure of Bill Clinton.
That's my point.
I'm worried that this tax evasion stuff is going to be the blue dress of the Biden administration. Okay, you got us. 6 months, time served. And really the problem is he's selling access to the decision makers of our government, including himself.
You are deep. Oh my gosh, that's why I don't ever change the channel. Yes, no, this is insane. On the same page is this guy, Joe Blow from Kokomo. He's in custody, right?
Yes,
they gather evidence, to make a case or convict him, right? Although, come on, it is obvious that he's guilty. Okay.
Well, our justice system is based on not going that way. He is allowed to mount a defense, but it certainly sounds like the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department is and Police Department is working very hard on that. I don't know if Lars has any affiliates out there.
But Secret Service guys who, our elected official, Mr. Joe Biden and his, glorious son, who, oh my gosh, they have so many, so much dirty on him. It's.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's what lawyers get paid $100 an hour for. Sheila, I appreciate it. You have a great, and I'm glad you found the Lars Larson show. We had a guy on the phone who was going to ask about the cocaine and how much was found, and I did some digging, and thanks to Mackenzie, 207 micrograms, and that's about $41 street value. There, Ray is next in on First Amendment Friday. Thank you, Ray. Thank you for calling in at 866. Hey, Lars, what's on your mind?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, but I'm kind of a naysayer on something that Lars had said a while back.
Okay.
I'd like to get your input on it, though. He was saying that if we were to impeach Biden, Kamala Harris would not be a bad substitute, better than he is. My take on that is you're trading an idiot for an imbecile. And if I'm not mistaken, if he serves 2 years and then she takes over, she gets that 2 years and then has the right to have her own 2 terms. So we could theoretically have her for the next 10 years.
There's a timing frame in that, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but there's a period of time into a president's term that attaches, and then after that it's just the one there. But understand something, and rest your head easily on your MyPillow, Ray. This has all been the Valerie Jarrett presidency. The 8 years of President Obama and so far the 2 years of Joe Biden, it's all been Valerie Jarrett and Google her name. We'll come back. $6 billion for a lousy football team? Next on the Lars Larson Show. Hosted by Joe Thomas, sitting in for Lars this week, and I appreciate you joining us on First Amendment Friday. You call at 866-HEY-LARS, and you get to talk with us and share what's on your mind, like Anthony is, and then we're going to find out a little bit more detail about this sale of the Deadskins and why you would pay $6.05 billion for a team that can barely win half its games. But Anthony, first to you on First Amendment Friday. What's on your mind? Anthony?
Yeah, the previous caller had just mentioned this Kamala person somehow getting into office if the other lunatic were removed, and then being unable to run twice. And that can't happen. I mean, the 22nd Amendment, remember, they said, okay, we're never going to have another mess like we did with FDR. If he had left after 8 years, his legacy would have been failure. But he stuck around.
There is a number of months, though. I remember seeing this. There is a number of months into a president's term that if they can't complete the term, it doesn't count towards the vice president taking over. I think it's past the 3-year mark. So Joe would have to go at least 3 years. I'm pretty sure it's at least to the 3-year mark. Before it doesn't, it doesn't become Kamala Harris's year there. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and my Google fingers are not working fast enough for me, Anthony. But I know I've seen the legal precedent on it that there is a window that if it happens late enough in somebody's presidency, it doesn't by the 27th count against the vice president that moves in.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up. It's the 22nd Amendment. It's 2 years. So according to this, the first clause in it is no person can have more than 2 terms, or no one can be elected. That's what it is. No one can be elected more than twice. And if they held office took over for somebody else, then if less than 2 years went by, they could run. But the indication is that they couldn't run a second time.
Well, it's like I said, though,
thing in there.
Whoever it is, it's Valerie Jarrett's job to run the country, as she has been since 2008. I appreciate it, Anthony. Joining us now is the program director at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University, play-by-play man for Wake Forest University, as well as the University of Virginia through his day, as well as sports talk host in places like Atlanta, Georgia. He is Mac McDonald. Mac, thank you for joining us this evening on the Lars Larson Show.
Hey, Joe, it's great to talk to you. Thank you, bud.
So $6.05 billion for a team that can barely win 7 games a year. What kind of marketplace are we in right now? What do you think Jerry Jones could get for the Cowboys, who actually win more frequently?
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure Cowboys fans would agree with you there. And, Joe, what has happened with this, the sale should be, and the Josh Harris group with Magic Johnson and everybody should be, they should be celebrating. I'm sure they're having a big steak in D.C. tonight to try to put things back together. But really, the cloud over the whole sale has to do with the Mary Jo White report that was released right after the sale was announced, and that the NFL owners said, yes, that's great. Hey, we love to have Josh Harris because they want a brighter future naturally for their league, but also for the Commanders. And but this Mary Jo White report is pretty. Now, granted, it could be a $60 million fine for Dan Snyder, which is only less than 1% of the $6 billion, but he could be in court for a long time. We're talking Virginia laws, D.C. laws, and it all has to do with the fact that Dan Snyder and his team kept revenues away from the NFL and from the other owners. And the other owners know this. They've seen the report. It's a 22-page report, Joe, and it is not very flat. It's not flattering at all for Dan.
So
Snyder.
this is even beyond the allegations of sexual misconduct and toxic workplace. This is actually grifting off of the NFL, which, I mean, there are probably people who are sitting there saying, gee, I wonder if I could steal money from the NFL too. But regardless, if he brokered that kind of deal, and was withholding money, that could get ugly. And the NFL has some pretty high priced lawyers they could weigh in on this with, I imagine.
Well, in fact, we're talking 6 years, Joe. And let me just quote, and I'll try to paraphrase this. This is from page 13 of the report. Quote, although Mr. Snyder denied it, multiple witnesses informed us that Mr. Snyder pressured employees to improve the club's financial performance. Every dollar matters, and the evidence shows that as one way of achieving higher revenues and lower costs, the club during 2009 and 2015 wrongfully violated the sharing rules in order to retain greater amounts of shareable revenues through VTS savings. So what we're talking about, that Dan Snyder, told his general managers and on down, said, all right, look, we got to find a way to save money. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold back some revenues to share with the rest of the club. And the Mary Jo White report, there's a small mention, naturally, the sexual harassment thing with the cheerleader, but this goes deep, and I don't think Dan Snyder is going to be able to escape this.
And that's going to be interesting on that end. But now we go forward with the Harris Group and Irvin Johnson and his big smile and backslapping. They're asking either Maryland or Virginia's taxpayers to build them a new football stadium, and that's dropped almost immediately. I know Dan Snyder was floating the idea around. Glenn Youngkin put that out for some feelers, and it got rebuked pretty quickly. But they're going to be wanting a new stadium too for this team.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think Josh Harris, with his group, Magic Johnson and, the people that he has worked with, with partial ownership with the Guardians and they've got a lot of power. And I think they know a lot of people. And I think the fact that there are a lot of people within the Beltway now that are excited the fact that Harris is the owner. And I think they've wanted this, Joe, for a long time. And so what does it mean? It means that Harris, who grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland, whose mom still lives there, a guy that used to walk to the old Redskins games, that this is the guy that can get things done. He's got the power, the money. He's done it before. Mm-hmm. This is, I hate to use the cliche, it's not his first rodeo, but being with the Sixers and he's just got a lot of power. And then when you throw in Magic Johnson, and Magic Johnson said in the press conference, I love this. Magic said in the press conference today, if you think I'm joining this group to just be, provide money, he goes, I want to win. And that sounds like a point guard in the NBA, right?
That's it.
But I think they will with their power, Joe, and their political. I think they will be able to convince a lot of people. Yes, a new stadium is a priority for sure.
I just don't know if the taxpayers right now feel like that's the best use of their money, as everyone's kind of squeezing, the ticket prices. And this becomes a bigger abstract about sports. I was looking at full price ticket sales, and it's hard to find this, but full price ticket sales for baseball games are down. But the stadiums are getting filled up because of these ticket broker sites. Even MLB.com has a site through it where you can get game day tickets for 1/4 of what the asking price is. Full price. They're getting some butts in the seats, and it's great for the concessioners. But I just, at some point, it's a bridge too far. They've got a perfectly fine stadium. Everybody knows how to get there. Renovate it if you've got amenities. I love the people who say, well, we don't have enough luxury boxes. Are these the only people who are going to these games anymore? And you and I have talked about this with the ACC television contracts and everything. At some point, people are going to just stop buying the stuff from the advertisers, and the advertisers are going to say, why am I paying all this money?
Yeah, I think, and Joe, you're right, and you're very astute because we've been heading down this road for a long time, and college athletics is a whole nother story and window of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
with what's happening in the power conferences and that kind of thing. But
Thank you.
Look out, this Josh Harris he's a mover and a shaker.
This is the Lars Larson Show with Joe Thomas sitting in. It's First Amendment Friday, and my name is Joe Thomas, and I'm joining you from Charlottesville, Virginia. I got an email saying, is this the first time a nationally syndicated talk show is hosted from Charlottesville? Certainly not. Lars has been here many times doing this very show from this very town, although I'm technically in a place called Palmyra. And yes, just like the references to the biblical city in Syria, but far closer. So it may be the first one ever hosted from Palmyra. 866, hey Lars, it is the phone number for us on First Amendment Friday. It has been a wild ride, 866-439-5277. So many things, I thought, target-rich environment, certainly the Biden crime family and the Chuck Grassley release of FBI documents, and everyone running around saying that's unproven, except for this video, too, because the FBI documents say the Bidens were dealing in bribery and the Burisma Holdings Company. And
13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money.
No, that never happened. See, that's AI. That's our artificial intelligence there. So that's fun there. This happened, and it's obscured by clouds right now. And a very frightening bill was introduced by a bunch of senators, including Virginia's Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, along with 49 other senators, all of the Democratic Party, to introduce the Freedom to Vote Act. You get a chill just with the name of these things. So obviously, if we need a bill that's called the Freedom to Vote Act, we must be keeping people from voting. So far, I've only heard of a dozen or so cases where people's votes were not allowed to be cast. They were all conservatives, and they all tried to vote on Election Day only to find out that somebody had already voted in their name. Some of the chilling things in this Freedom to Vote Act that all the Democrats in the Senate have put out: automatic voter registration and online voter registration. Election Day would become a public holiday, federal holiday. Uniform early voting across the nation. This is a federalization of elections. Same-day voter registration. Nobody thinks that's a good idea. Federal minimum standards on vote by mail and drop boxes, which means now vote by mail and drop boxes become the law of the land. No more states' rights. Where is that 10th Amendment when you need it? Strengthens voter list maintenance standards. That's ERIC, the ERIC program that we found out was being used by the Zuckerbucks people to go find unregistered but eligible voters and drag them to the polls. Requires provisional ballots to count for all eligible races regardless of what precinct they were cast in. So you can vote wherever. Standards for voter identification, requiring a uniform national standard for states to require identification for in-person voting. It's ambiguous about what that is. Voting rights restorations for returning citizens. Currently, most states have some plan for somebody who's served their time. Usually it involves a petition and either the attorney general or the governor. In Virginia, it's the governor has to go through it, and I guess there's a process, and you fill out a form and you say, I promise not to do it again. And if they believe you, you get your voting rights back. They want it to be automatic. So this is another one that you didn't hear about. Nobody has covered this. Came out Thursday. And I've looked on the national wires and there's nowhere to be seen in there. So target-rich environment on that. Your thoughts on that? Also, a couple of other stories, and this one has certainly fired people up. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has issued an executive order to deprioritize enforcement on laws prohibiting possession of certain psychedelics. Now, it has been at 866 Hey Lars, a very controversial, a very hot topic, and that's good. Conversation is good. But understand something about mind-altering inebriates and a society that has devolved away from the 10 Commandments, the 7 deadly sins or vices, however you choose to identify them, that has devolved away from simple rule books. We took the 10 Commandments out of school. I drink wine after I went through chemotherapy and my stomach doesn't tolerate beer. I love me. It was all I wanted. You want to talk about a medical irony. It's all I wanted during chemotherapy. I was restricting my diet, so I couldn't have any beer. But we beat the cancer. So I said, well, when we beat this cancer, the first thing I want is a beer. And anyone who's been through chemotherapy will know that there are things that change in you. Sometimes things that you used to like the taste of, you don't anymore. Things like, well, in my case, the only thing I wanted was a beer. Went to a local craft brew place that's good, straight up folks. Ordered a lager. Got halfway through it and I went, oh, this is not good. And it just doesn't sit. I don't know if it's the yeast. I don't know why. So I drink wine now. But there's been a simple rule in my house. When everything is done. I've said this to my kids for years. I don't drink when I'm working because I don't work when I'm drinking. But we've lost that societal responsibility. We think a little peyote, oh, it's psilocybin, it helps me with these things. Well, all right, there are other ways to help you with this. And opioids of all natures have become, in my view, too easily prescribed for things that we don't wish to repair medically, or your insurance doesn't cover the repair medically for it. And I will draw the line all the way back to 2010 when, before we read it, we voted for it, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And so we have people who, instead of getting orthopedic surgery to repair something that's wrong with them, they're told, listen, it'll heal up okay. You're not a ball player anyway. We're not going to do surgery. You don't qualify. This is the famous advisability of care panels that Sarah Palin rightfully said could be death panels in the case of certain medical treatments. These advisability of care panels under Obamacare decide, well, you're not going to. So you get pain meds. And way too many people are getting hooked on the pain meds, and then they go up and up and up, and then you wind up into fentanyl. You start looking for other things. And I don't know, the civilian use, but you're talking about strength of product and what it does to a person. We do, I think, lose the ability to testify on this because things are illegal, so we just don't talk about them. Well, there we go. We fixed it. These drugs are illegal, so we don't have to talk about it anymore. 866, hey, Lars. It is First Amendment Friday on the Lars Larson Show. Call in. Joe Thomas in for Lars tonight. And again, it's been a blessing to spend some time with you here across Lars's network. And Mackenzie's done a great job handling it. It was crazy for a while. Everyone was jumping in on First Amendment Friday because the gauntlet was laid down. I was told, don't worry, Joe, not that many people call when there's a guest host. I'm like, all right, well, it's on like Donkey Kong then. Let's see if we can't get some folks riled up on some of the things that are going on. We talked about the the police not enforcing the law. And the bigger issue in Minnesota is not that the mayor of Minneapolis said don't enforce the psychedelic possessions law. It's that they don't have the intestinal fortitude to actually change the law. Come on, Nancy, grow a set and actually introduce legislation that decriminalizes it. Why don't you do that? Why doesn't a member of the House of Representatives bring up a bill that would declassify it as a Schedule 1? I don't see it anywhere. And there's a subtext that I see to it, and maybe I'm a little wonky to this. I've been accused of slicing the bologna so thin it starts to look like prosciutto. But if you establish that police officers can just pick and choose on their whim what laws they enforce or not, that opens a can of worms that I think we manifest seeing all the time. People running from shooting at police officers, people fighting with police officers, people protesting the arrest of people by police officers because there's this now publicly held belief, thanks to President Obama and what was the Mayor Fry in Minneapolis, that the police can just decide, I'm not going to enforce that law today. That brings on the anarchy that allows the authoritarians to step in and say, all right, folks, we're gonna finally put away this whole silly Bill of Rights thing because it's obviously left things. You'll have all the same stuff. You'll have your cable channels. You'll have your car. Maybe you have to carpool. But we'll let you keep the trappings of the United States. But we're going to put away all the silly Constitution stuff, and we'll write something new, something far more equitable. The phrase that pays, equitable. Another thing that I saw just scooching through some of the areas that Lars' show is on, Connecticut Department of Labor reports that 75% of unemployment claims this year have been bogus. Juxtapose that with a federal audit that said of the $888 billion in extended unemployment benefits under COVID, $191 billion not were, but are, not could have been, but are fraudulent. Why do you think all these things never wind up penciling out to do the things they do? Because they just become a scam. A scam on the bureaucrats' end, as I see it, where the bureaucrats skimming away money. If you send $1 to Washington, 40 cents comes back, maybe less? Bureaucrats got to have his lunches paid by somebody. A woman is suing a California restaurant named, and if you go to a place, this is my view, if you go to a place called Coup de Thai, I think you should expect that it's spicy food. And I've been in restaurants where I haven't known the cuisine, so I ask, what is this all about? Personal responsibility. And we lose that all the time. It's the restaurant's fault that the woman burned her mouth or had indigestion or whatever she may have suffered after eating. Yeah, and believe me, I've had some hot, spicy Thai food. Whew. It'll clear your sinuses. President Trump announced today that if he becomes president again in 2024, human trafficking, as we see played out in the box office, will become a death penalty, or he'll try to get a bill passed that will make human trafficking punishable by the death penalty. And I wonder about this. And it was interesting. Yesterday, both the Oppenheimer and Barbie movies came out. And there's so much internet traffic on this. I love the internet for this kind of stuff. It's Oppen Barbie. It's Barbieheimer, and I think the studios are actually having some fun with it as well. Barbie escapes the Mattel universe to invent the nuclear bomb. I'm pretty sure that the Oppenheimer movie is supposed to portray nuclear as bad. I'll probably see it, but I'll be curious to see where Sound of Freedom falls in this. Where do you think? Because I know a lot of people who have not seen Sound of Freedom yet, or are going back with other people to see it again, or to bring other people with them. I had a friend tell me he bought 18 tickets to Saturday night's show because Oppenheimer took in $10.5 million yesterday. Barbie earned $22.3 million. What does this tell you about American society? If Barbie doubles biopic about the guy who invented, the Manhattan Project and the whole thing, it's $10 million. More than twice as many people went to go see Barbie. But I'll be curious to see. I'm pretty sure that Sound of Freedom will still be in the top 3. And yet somehow you'll be told, don't go see that movie. And it's amazing to me that human trafficking is something that has become so sadly a political football. How can this not be something we all agree on? How can this be a political divide? How can young children being taken from their homes or a bus station, maybe they're a runaway, maybe the human trafficking that happens so many different ways. I remember the tsunami in Sri Lanka and all the aid agencies that were there, and we were doing an interview with somebody about it, and they were down. You remember the pictures of the wave just eating up all these resorts. And I said, wow, there's a ton of aid agencies down there. I said, yeah, it's the human trafficking. They were all down here already looking for missing kids. That was a gut punch. I didn't even think we were doing top 40 radio at the time, so it wasn't highbrow stuff. And just the guy says, no, it's human trafficking, Sri Lanka and places like that. I mean, it's amazing to me, almost as amazing as I watch members of the political left insist that parents have no rights over their children. Earlier this week, we had Governor Glenn Youngkin here in Virginia. They issued their guidelines for schools to deal with parents who may have children who are having gender dysphoria and that kind of thing. How is that? How is parents having authority over the kids a partisan issue? But even more so, how is human trafficking a partisan issue? 866, hey Lars, you're listening to the Lars Larson Show. Joe Thomas in for Lars Larson tonight from the Second, and I will correct, and I do agree with the email. Grammatically and societally, it is more correct to say Charlottesville is the second most important city in the history of mankind, based on the work product of a couple of kids from around here. We're not going to take the gold from Galilee, mostly because what they did here in Charlottesville is based on what he did after he left Galilee. So that being said, 866, hey Lars is the phone number. Twitter poll going on, and it involves the Jason Aldean song, and you can vote online at Lars Larson Show for the Twitter feed. And of course, Twitter poll is brought to you by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, conservative values that we all believe in. Joined myself, gosh, got to be a decade ago. Lars, a longtime member as well. Go to amac.us or call 888-262-2006. AMAC is better for you and better for America. Here are the results as we go right now to the most recent. Are the protests over Jason Aldean's song Try That in a Small Town making more people buy it or fewer? Currently, 94% of you say it's increasing sales. There's a second one. Should public school teachers receive merit-based pay? 20% say no. I'm actually one of them. 81% say yes, and at some point you might want to ask me why. Lots of other things. The Freedom to Vote Act by Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine and all the Democrats in the U.S. Senate. That's on the docket. The executive order from the Minneapolis mayor to ignore possession of psychedelics now. But to you, Matt, first in here this hour. We'll also talk to Horace Cooper from Project 21 on the Supreme Court ethics plans of the Senate. But, Matt, thank you for joining us on First Amendment Friday. What's on your mind?
Well, yes, I would buy Jason Aldean's record. I think that guy's right on. But I was thinking here earlier, what's going on in the United States of America? And the first thing that popped in my head was perestroika, which is if you interpret Russian, it comes down to restructure. Mm-hmm. It comes down to the media, and what's happening now is that the media is basically run by the Democrats. Nothing is getting put out there that should be put out. Donald Trump's son did what Mr. Biden's son did, Hunter Biden did. This guy would have been lynched by now. But sure. Biden is getting away with this. What do you think?
Well, it's partially because so many of the other ones are getting away with it. I don't know if you've ever read Secret Empires. Gosh, now I'm spacing out the name of the. I've had him on the show, my local show, several times. He's been deep into all of the corruption in Washington. But the stories of Elaine Chao, who was President Trump's Secretary of Transportation, and her father, who runs a Chinese Communist Party shipping company, and all of the different people who go to Washington with nothing and come out wildly wealthy, like Barack Obama. There are very few people who go to Washington and get poorer. Donald J. Trump is one of them, and that's why there's not the zeal to go after Joe Biden, because there's skeletons in everyone's closet.
One of my examples is he was on national TV, and he was on one of the alphabet shows.
I'm only getting every third word from you, Matt. Maybe you call back with a better cell or something. I appreciate it. Peter Schweitzer. Can't believe I didn't remember his name. Peter Schweitzer has done some great work. Secret Empires. And it's and the cover of it has Joe Biden on it, certainly. But he's not the only one. That's why there's a lack of enthusiasm to pursue this. And that's why I am afeared that we're going to get tax evasion charges stuck to Hunter Biden, dust ourselves off, clap ourselves on the back, and say, good job, guys, we did it. When you didn't do it. You didn't do it any better than you didn't do it when Bill Clinton was caught using his power as governor of Arkansas to make money for himself and the McDougalls in Whitewater. This is the kind of corruption we have to weed out. And he's right about perestroika being, the idea is the restructuring. And the Soviet Union was trying to go through it. Gorbachev especially tried to engage in it because he felt like the Soviet Union, predictably, was coming apart. It was falling apart. It was bankrupt. It couldn't keep up the arms race. It was losing in Afghanistan. So he was trying to restructure how the system worked. Wasn't the First Lady... Michelle Obama, famous for saying we need to fundamentally reimagine what America is? Barack Obama himself on a Chicago radio station famously said that he, as a constitutional professor, his concern with the Constitution was its negative agenda. It was negative towards what the government could be doing for all the people. Yet the original place we hear perestroika is in a country that was designed to do all these things for people, and it was coming apart at the seams. Why our own gold standard was eliminated for many reasons, but for the most part it was because the Great Society was about to bankrupt us. And if we didn't get off the gold standard, we didn't have the money to keep the social programs. You want to talk about a debt limit. And this just in, by the way, the Biden administration has ordered Janet Yellen and Attorney General Merrick Garland and a bunch of staffers to come up with a way to avoid a debt limit showdown ever again. Well, that sounds like a representative republic, doesn't it? Just give me the authority to spend what I need to and as I see fit. And the Constitution doesn't have a blind spot when it comes to this kind of corruption. The Constitution may have some blind spots in it, but the Constitution was not blind when it came to the propensity of people to be corrupt. Oh, no. That's why it specifically didn't want to give too much authority, especially in the expenditures. I think Matt's back before we run to break, and we've got Horace Cooper coming up. Matt, it may have gotten a better connection for us. Is that you again, Matt?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
No. It's happened. Cell service can be dodgy. So
Yeah.
quickly, before we go to break, last word.
So my example would be that the reporter that was working for CBS or NBC that got fired
Quickly.
for asking a question.
All right, see you. You're listening to the Lars Larson Show. And this is Joe Thomas in for Lars Larson tonight. And again, apologies, Matt. That's bad host etiquette. I didn't realize how close we were to the break there. But he was asking about we'll get back into the issue of how they are treating the media in this and the perestroika attitude. But joining us on the Newsmakers line from Project 21, the Black Leadership Network of the National Center for Public Policy Research, and a man who has won so many cases in front of the Supreme Court to weigh in on the Senate wanting to come up with an ethics standard for the Supreme Court justices. He is the great Horace Cooper. Horace, thank you for joining us this evening. How are you doing? So, Horace, where is Horace at? See if I understand this. The U.S. Senate, who is still grappling with the idea of prohibiting members of the Senate from trading in stocks that they might regulate at some point or are regulating at this current moment, and they can't figure that out. But they're going to come up with new rules to regulate the ethics of a Supreme Court justice. Have I grasped the abstract of what the Senate is trying to do?
Well, I think you have, but I think both examples are part of a misunderstanding of what our founders absolutely intended.
That would shock me.
We have a separation of powers in our federalist system. A legislative, a judicial, and an executive. And what has happened as this country has matured has been a unwillingness to remember the importance of keeping those separate. This new proposal for ethics would seek to have the legislative branch intrude in the space of the judicial branch. But even the example of investments in stocks would seek an action to bring the executive branch into the area of space of oversight over the legislative. And I get that in America there is a general conception that we have a bunch of scoundrels that are occupying our halls of power. Our founders intended for the legislature to primarily be responsible for disciplining its members. There is a process that our founders gave us for rogue members of the judiciary as well as that of the executive. When Ted Stevens was a senator, he was charged by the executive branch, the Department of Justice, with receiving benefits for a cabin rebuild that were the equivalent of a bribe. It turned out not only had he not underpaid, he had overpaid. Not only that, the FBI, several of their investigators were in a sexual relationship with several of the witnesses. In fact, when the whole thing was said and done, he had been charged, he had been found guilty, and then a judge ended up overturning his conviction. I mention this story because when he was under the charge and ended up being found convicted, his reelection happened simultaneously. He lost.
Mm-hmm.
And by losing, the 60th seat that was necessary for Obamacare became open and was placed by a member of the Executive's Party. Our founders never intended for the judiciary or the legislature to allow the other branch to use the police powers as a means of controlling those.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have now witnessed, I think many of your audience will agree, there's been a selective use of this investigatory power, one that seems to align with the interests of the particular incumbent who is the executive.
Yeah.
We don't need that to happen with our judiciary. The progressives have told us that they are upset, not truly about any ethics issue, but about the rulings that have come down. Justice Sotomayor has nearly doubled her wealth since she joined the Supreme Court,
Interesting.
while salaries have not increased by double to be a member of the Supreme Court. There has been no desire to investigate her use of her staff to promote book sales when she does speaking engagements.
Mm-hmm.
If, in fact, all concerns about ethics were legitimate and even-handed, there would already be an investigation. What we will see if this type of change were put into place is a selective investigation and even prosecution of justices. We need a serious system of accountability, and that's already existing in our Constitution.
Horace Cooper is on with us from Project 21. Horace, I've got to ask, though, when you talk about the use of the Department of Justice in this way, the Constitution really doesn't establish this type of Department of Justice with a national police department. And really, in its founding, the Attorney General was really there to advise the legislative branch on legislation they were going to pass or try to pass as to its potential constitutionality.
Yes. So there has been this growing effort, and I mentioned this term, that we think, maybe there's evidence, that we have a lot of scoundrels in Washington.
I can't imagine.
We don't fix that problem by empowering an executive to pick and choose as he might. We have a former president of the United States who is now under indictment. The charges that are presented are charges that many legal scholars believe are a complete stretch of the authority. The issue here is that if Congress passes like this ethics bill for the judiciary or passes a measure to limit the ability of senators or Congress to invest in stocks, it will not be that every single member who is in breach will be subject to penalties. It will be selective prosecution.
Right.
And it can shift who has the control. The founders intended for us to have the control. Let's try not to elect so many scoundrels. Let's pressure our elected officials to punish people if they abrogate the rules. In the case of Ted Stevens, the Ethics Committee never was able to make a finding, the Senate Ethics Committee, that he had broken any rules. It is remarkable that even though there is a judicial process for investigating ethics problems, one that they have set up themselves,
Horace.
it is remarkable that we would kick that to the curb and all but criminalize ethics issues.
Horace Cooper is on with us from Project 21 at the National Center for Public Policy Research, nationalcenter.org. Horace, I've got to run to a break here because you've opened a can of worms by using the Ted Stevens. We've also got Julie hanging on the line. More room for you as well at 866 Hey Lars. It's First Amendment Friday. Joe Thomas in for the Lars Larson Show. Thank you for letting us sit in for you and be of some service to you on this First Amendment Friday. My name is Joe Thomas, coming to you from Charlottesville, Virginia, and we're going to go to Horace Cooper's on the hold here for a second, but being First Amendment Friday, I want to go to Julie first, who appears to be calling from the land of the great mullet toss down there on the Gulf. Julie, so that's a laugh of somebody who's been to the mullet toss.
You haven't lived until.
How are you doing this First Amendment Friday?
Fine. You were talking about Hitler and disarming the citizens, and I was able to speak to my Armenian grandparents who fled the Armenian genocide, which happened before the Holocaust, and Hitler did take the Ottoman Turks playbook and said, look what they did to the Armenians, and that happened before the Holocaust. So, yes, disarming citizens would not be wise at all.
And, it's interesting context, and I don't know where you stand on it. I'm not picking at that nit. But in Ukraine, I have friends whose families still live in Odessa, and all those fighters, the men and women, the civilians that to me are exemplar of why we have a Second Amendment. They're standing up for their neighborhoods and fighting on the street corners. Apparently, Volodymyr Zelensky has told them all, and this is testimony secondhand from people who have told me what their family members were told, that at the end of the conflict, when they're successfully defending the homeland, they'll be asked for those back. I hope.
Yeah. And then you think of the American Revolution. It was a bunch of farmers with guns that took on the Great British Navy. I mean, yeah.
No, but I hope
for what we believe in.
And I know Zelensky is corrupt, and I know that Obama and Biden paid a lot of money to get him elected, but I don't think anyone has the right to invade somebody else's country. I don't care what you think of them. In that case, that'll start the phone calls.
Are you talking about Mexico and our southern border?
Yeah, exactly. But what I hope Volodymyr Zelensky gets when he successfully defends and Russia goes packing is a whole different country. I hope that the men and women of Ukraine stand up and say, we're keeping these. From our cold, dead hands, you will have to wrest these guns. And I hope he comes home to a much different Ukraine, one that wants a Second Amendment just like ours, because they've seen they are living proof of why we have it. So I hope that's the case for them.
Well, that's a very good perspective. Yes, that would be wonderful if that happens.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing.
Not at all. You have a great day, and thank you for checking in. Horace Cooper is on with us, Project 21 National Center for Public Policy. Horace, you were going on, and you brought up Ted Stevens and his reelection campaign and how that played out. While it wound up being overturned, there was no there. I look at the indictment of 16 people who signed a piece of paper saying that if something goes sideways, we're ready to be electors for the state of Michigan. They're in their 60s and 70s, facing 45 years in prison for the forgery charges and the things they're charged with. Is this designed to sort of be a Stevens-esque prosecution while re-elections are going on, to wait on the election? And are they leaning on these 16 electors to try to get somebody to either sing or compose about January 6th?
It operates in many ways like what we saw Again, there is no state law that covers the behavior of electors, whether or not they are legitimate or illegitimate. There is no federal law that covers those electors. The Department of Justice is crafting its own measures, and the Attorney General in Michigan is crafting her own measure. The goal here, again, is to manipulate the existing law to capture. We had a case in which the governor of Virginia was indicted for alleged improprieties
I remember.
that were not a violation of Virginia law. And in fact, ultimately, the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision said it was not a violation of federal law.
There was somebody familiar. There's somebody. There's somebody who was involved in that's back in business again, isn't it?
Yes, the special counsel, Mr. Smith, who is investigating the former president, Donald Trump. The point here is, many analysts suggest that the taint of a criminal charge affected the likelihood and success of Republicans controlling both the state legislature
That's right.
and their chances of controlling the governor's mansion.
That's true.
This after that governor had won one of the largest election margins that had occurred in the last 25 years. These selective prosecutions end up having significant political blowback. We absolutely need to retrench from this ability of either Congress or the executive branch to empower themselves to step into other branches. It is the job of the Virginia state legislature to decide whether or not they have a rogue governor, and there is a constitutional measure for addressing said thing. So, full circle, the ethics system that is being predicated will only attempt to tilt the balance and maybe even force a recusal under a new standard that could change the outcome of a Supreme Court ruling.
Amazing.
That denies us the rule of law. That denies us the protection of having 9 justices.
It's rule of man, isn't it, Horace? It turns into the whim of the people at the moment instead of the will of the law.
Absolutely. Again, I am not here to attack Justice Sotomayor.
No.
I am here only to say that, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when her husband's firm brought cases before the Supreme Court, she didn't recuse herself. When her daughter was hired by firms with cases before the court to write briefs or to submit studies, again, she did not recuse herself. I don't say that prevented her from giving America the best example of law. What I say is that if you weren't concerned about that, then it tells me that you are more interested in the outcome of a particular case than you are in the process of deciding who is going to rule on the case. In the same way that those folks who cheered the prosecution of Ted Stevens weren't so interested in seeing to it that he wasn't supplementing his income and getting support for a separate cabin at a discount, as they were in seeing to it that Barack Obama's effort to overtake nearly 20% of the American economy, our healthcare system, could succeed.
Yeah, and that is how deeply it's thought through, Horace. It's amazing to see. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this Friday evening. I hope you have an amazing weekend. Again, find them online at nationalcenter.org. Horace Cooper, God bless you, sir, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And thank you. We got another segment of you and me. First Amendment Friday. Make me work for this. Joe Thomas filling in for Lars Larson. 866. Hey, Lars. Joe Thomas here in for Lars. One more segment with you on this First Amendment Friday. This has been so much fun poking around a couple of things, your thoughts, my thoughts, and they all mix together. This is how I trained up for this. Somebody asked me once doing an interview bio thing, what was my training for this? I said, I grew up in a world where, my friends and I all would go hang out at a city park and past sunset. Shh, don't tell anyone. And we would just talk about everything. I mean, there would be music playing in the background. We had a car stereo, but we would just talk about everything. And then we would go to a diner at 2 o'clock in the morning and debate more things. And it was constantly, it was like cars, politics, girls, movies. It didn't make a difference. That's why this is fun to me, because this is just like the old days. And it was fun then, and it's fun now. There are a couple of things follow up on. I did a couple of pokes around. So the box office numbers. So we were talking about Barbie had doubled up Oppenheimer, which should tell you much about our society. Twice as many people seeing Barbie over Oppenheimer. 22 million on Thursday to 10 million. But there it is, chugging along. Sound of Freedom, holding steady at number 3. Mission Impossible dropped out of number 1. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Social Security Trust Fund, or whatever the movie is called, that's down, dropped to 3rd, 4th, 5th now. Insidious is down to 6th. Elemental is down to 7th. Spider-Man is 8th. And it was interesting, though. You look at the number of weeks, so gross right now. Sound of Freedom has already, total gross is $104.5 million. It's been out 17 days. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Social Security Trust Fund has grossed $152 million. It's been out 21 days. Elemental, $131 million. It's been out 35 days. Spider-Man, all right, this Spider-Man is $372 million, but it's been out 49 days. And I know so many people, you may know them as well, who are bringing more people to see Sound of Freedom. And I can't wrap my head safely around how this is a controversial movie. It's a controversial subject, that the fact that human trafficking goes on. But my intellect does understand that there are people who are looking at everything in a political milieu. Does this make Joe Biden look good? Does it make Donald Trump look good? These are children. These are supposedly the children that the political authoritarian cares more about than their parents do. And yet we'll demagogue this issue and then pretend when somebody does an amazing film that's a gut punch to try to wake people up that this is going on, that there's real slavery going on today, rather than tearing down statues because slavery happened 150 years ago. There's real tragedy going on, and we can do something about it. And this is where you have to be honest. You can't just say, rub some dirt in there. Kids in trouble. Kids run away. Kids get on the internet and they start talking to people they shouldn't be talking to with untoward intentions because they don't realize. Or maybe these are the only people that are paying any attention to their troubles. And there's so many different sources to the human trafficking issue. And President Trump said today, reelect me and I'm going to work with Congress to make it a death penalty crime. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I know there's a lot of folks who don't like the death penalty as an abstract, but I certainly think something like this, the horrors that this becomes, rises to a kind of standard to that. But how is this something that's even debatable? Oh, well, there's a conspiracy. I mean, I've heard people tell me that this is all conspiracy theory stuff, that it's not really happening. There's a documentary series that's in production called Exile. It's by a former member of Congress who, along with the filmmaker behind the film The Swamp, there were two iterations of The Swamp. One was just on YouTube, and then the second one was on Netflix. But Matt, along with Tom Garrett, the former congressman, have gone off to places where real slavery is existing, where real racial supremacy, where real racial cleansing is going on. And this movie, it appears to me, is doing a bang-up job, and this is why so many people have told me, I bought 18 more tickets. I've seen it, but a bunch of my friends haven't seen it yet, so I bought 18 tickets, and I'm taking them to see it. And if I was going to be with you Monday night, I am not. These are our last few moments together for this particular session. Who knows what comes in the future? Nothing is ever guaranteed. I always do every radio show like it's going to be my last because in some cases, at least in terms of employment, it has been. So you never know. You never know when your last show is going to be. So you better stick the landing, kids. But for now, I won't be able to talk with you on Monday, but I will lay cash money down on the table right now that Sound of Freedom stays right where it is at number 3. And everyone will talk about how Barbie, had such a trounced Oppenheimer. And how shocking it is and what it tells you about the world, and people will make jokes about it. And if we had writers writing for the late night talk shows, we would be subjected to all of that. Maybe there's a blessing in the writer's strike. Who knows? And maybe this is driving some of the big box offices. There's no new TV to watch. That's okay. Here on Talk Radio, we work without a Writers Guild staff that has to worry about it. We have people like Mackenzie back in the studio making it all work. But I appreciated being able to spend the time. Thank you, Lars. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Donovan, and everyone back there at Lars headquarters. Joe Thomas here. So long, and thanks for all the fish.